workshops welcome to the third part of the workshops for requirements engineering principles for test engineers specifically. Today we will cover the following topics. We'll have some rather short welcome, maybe even faster than this. We'll cover the topics of types of documentation, quality criteria for requirements, and requirement documents. We'll talk about the popular ways of documenting the requirements, which are the user stories. I think you may have been already familiar to these methods. We'll look at it from different perspectives and also try out it together with the user story mapping technique, which is also used for prioritization of requirements. We'll have a rather short break and continue with use cases. It's another alternative method of documenting requirements. Also review the diagrams that can be used for documenting the requirements as well in a more structured way, in a visual way. And we'll have one practical exercise with them as well. And then it's this workshop will end at 9:15, and we will cover also the topic of requirements validation, negotiation, and prioritization at this last 10 to 15 minutes. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the chat or unmute yourself. We are rather a cozy small group today, so it's more than welcome. If you're not speaking, please stay on mute so that we have a clear sound without disturbances, and be on time. Yeah, both of you. So Tatiana, welcome. You're also, we can say, on time. So that's very nice. So we can spend our every single minute very effectively. If you have any questions, please do ask. We'll try to address it or put it in the parking lot and address it at the end of the session. And I, as usual, added the links to some references that you may find useful regarding the topics of the current webinar. So let me post in the chat the link to Miro. Please join. It's the same link as for the previous two workshops. And this time you should be able to access it, same as previously. And you will need to scroll down a little bit lower than the previous session, where you would see this white covered part, so that you will be able to work for our interactive exercises today. So let us start. Let us begin. Also, Tatiana, if you could formulate your day-to-day in one word, what would it be? We already did this with Julia. I wonder what will be for you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My current day was about very tough. So
very tough. Okay, I see. So let's make the end of this day productive, interesting for you, and I hope you'll be able to put something in a learning log of your own today. So thank you for sharing. Okay. Did you wanted to say something? No, because I've seen you unmuted yourself for a second. There's something in the chat. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. All right. So first we'll start with some theory, and then we'll have several practice parts. So I guess, I'm not sure if Tatiana, you were on previous workshops. I will quickly recap something about myself. My name is Paulina Carabatch. In the chat. Can you share Miro link? Yes, I can share it. I can. Please let me know if you don't see. Yeah, maybe like this also, everyone. Yeah. So I'm a functional analyst at Materialize company. I have more than 5 years of experience in analysis now, and I'm specialized on medical software projects and 3D printing area. I'm also a trainer for Business Analysis Fundamentals course at CodeSpace, and I'm also an IRAP certified professional for requirements engineering. And some other interesting things is that I'm distinguished Toastmaster, and I received the Materialized Gold Star Award for achievements in analysis area in 2018. So let's move on straight to our topics of today. So first of all, documenting of the requirements. So as soon as we completed our elicitation analysis phase, we have certain requirements at hand that we want to implement in the system. It's then a stage of documenting them. It's a stage where we put on paper or on digital form, usually it's the last one, the concise statements about what the system should be able to do, what should it look like, etc. So usually it's done in a different formats, and we'll look at the most popular ones today together with you and practice some of them. But it could be, for instance, requirements documents. Requirements documents would be the collection of individual requirements, certain statements about the system that is built up, that is collected based on the topic or part of the system into some formal document. Maybe not every project, not every team uses the formal documents, and we'll see the SRS is one of them. But yeah, that's still used in some of the projects, and we'll see why a bit later. The three documentation types that exists is natural language, conceptual models, and hybrid. Where natural language is the type of documentation that is done with just text, so just writing down the requirements. Conceptual models is the diagrams that we can create with UML, Bpmn, and other languages. Different types that have more rules, and we'll see advantages and disadvantages just in a second. And a hybrid is when we use both and get the advantages of both of the methods when they're combined. What are the advantages of the natural language? So when we're using the text, it's of course can be understood by any stakeholder. So business stakeholders, our team, nobody needs to read or learn some specific type of documentation of syntaxes, semantics, etc. The text can be read by everyone. So it's a low burden to work with it, to already start working with it. Then we can express any kind of requirement with the text. We can add any kind of logic, explanation, addition, etc. And yeah, basically it's an inevitable way also of documenting us, because for instance, as we'll see with modeling, not everything can be documented, and we'll still add certain textual additions, descriptions. The disadvantages is that with text, we can be more ambiguous. So in the sense that we can write something in a way that different people will interpret it differently. And there is higher chance to make a mistake in a requirement when it's written in text rather than a model. Although, of course, with models, we can also make mistakes. Nobody is secured from that, but also it's also difficult to isolate the information, different parts of it. So there are three perspectives of requirements. It's data perspective, behavioral, and functional. And both of these three of these perspectives in diagramming, in modeling, there can be very clearly separated, while with text, we have to put an extra effort to do that. While conceptual models, the advantage is that they are much more clear. You just look at the picture and you can grasp the information at a glance. They also help us to clarify some unknowns, something that it would be more difficult to see while we're discussing, while we are describing it with the text. With the model, we just need to set up a connection here, or to define, is there a connection between two items in a diagram or not? So it pushes us to clarifying some details and make the alignment between also different people and on understanding of the requirements more more clear. For a trained reader who knows the syntax and semantics, they're easier to read. But of course, for those who don't know the certain conventions of these diagrams, it will require them to learn it at first and to understand them. And it would also require for the requirement engineer, for the person who is documenting these models, to learn this first of all conventions, the syntaxes and semantics, but also learn the tools, how to build it, how to make it clear. And let's move on. So the structure of any requirements documentation is quite important, because depending how well we would structure it, how well we would split up the information inside of it, that will result in a better or lower amount of understanding and synchronization between the team. So that's why some standardized document structures are used. When we are using certain templates in our team for documenting the requirements, it has several advantages. It would help us to onboard new members of the team who would also need to either read or write these requirements. So for reviewers, for any team member, developer, testers, when they will be reviewing requirements, they would be able to quicker understand what can I expect to see from requirements and what not. For instance, if we're describing the non-functional requirements in a separate chapter, we can be sure that no other non-functional requirements, quality requirements, are in some other ones. Otherwise, it will be just a mistake of the requirement that needs to be fixed. So we can be more sure that we reviewed everything and that everything is in its right place. And also, if we need to search for that specific place, for instance, we need some exceptional scenarios, we need to find them. If they're in a specific place of every document, we can quicker go just to that chapter to review it. We can review specifically only that chapter without browsing through the entire document. It would also allow us for certain automation for verification of documents. For example, whether all chapters were filled in or all chapters have the proper information inside of it. And it's also a good way to help with reusing of documents. For example, if we know that we need this specific information from one project, it's applicable to the other one or to the newer version, we can just reuse the chapter without needing to, again, browse through the entire document of searching these small pieces of information that are applicable for us. Here we have the minimum content, like a rough structure that can be used for the requirements documents. And one of the templates, it's called SRS, specific requirement specification, software requirement specification, sorry. And there are several templates of that. One of the popular ones is the template by Carl Vickers. And it has following chapters. So an introduction, where we would state the purpose of the document, the system coverage, stakeholders that are impacted by and to whom this document may be interesting for review, definitions, acronyms, and abbreviations of these documents, which terminology or acronyms and abbreviations will be used there, not to confuse anybody on that regard. References to certain other documentation, perhaps the documents that were created prior to this SRS and were a basis, were the original input for it. For instance, some business documentation or high-level needs documentation for the system. And there's an overview of what this document will be about. The next part is the general overview with the system environment, description, then architecture description can be some high-level diagrams, although it's up to every requirements engineer, with the person who creates the document, and for the team to decide what structure they would have. Perhaps the architecture description can be in certain documents created by the architects, if that is more applicable, more technical information, but it really depends on the team agreements. System functionality. So here we have templates for that is applicable like for the entire system. So you can see here, we will describe all the system functionalities. That can be split up to certain separate requirements where we will be paying attention to certain blocks of functionality or even specific features, so that you don't have a 150 pages SRS documents, but instead you have, for example, 10 SRSs, but everyone has 15 pages, and you would go to the one that has the relevant block of the part of the system described, so you don't need to browse through entire. I wonder, in your teams, do you use such a document like SRS, or which kind of documentation do you use for requirements right now?
We have a requirements in Confluence.
Mm-hmm.
With no specific structure, even, I think. Just some pages with description of epics in our case.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Confluence and the free text of describing the epics. Okay. And Tatiana, as for you, do you have any maybe input here?
In my team, it is almost the same. Mostly, we have our requirements are in tickets in Jira, in a freestyle, something
like a user story, something like that, or not
we
really.
try to use a user story, but sometimes it's not so formal.
Okay, I see. Yeah, thank you. So Confluence, Jira, tickets, and not a formal large document. I see. So yeah, this is a structure. Yeah, we can go till the end of it, and then I will talk about when this document may be needed more, and for which teams. Why do we need it? So we have the system functionality, where will be description of the functionalities, of the features of this system, the user and our target audience, constraints and assumptions. And then we have the part of requirements, where would be requirements for all the features, or as I mentioned, it can be just a reference to the specific SRS for certain requirements, appendices and index at the end or at the beginning, doesn't matter. So when this document may be needed, it could be required from some stakeholders, perhaps, but more often it can be brought up by certain standard operational procedures, some requirements for the domain. For example, I'm currently working on a project in medical domain, and for us, having such a formal documentation that could be placed in a location with signatures, etc., is a must-have to be able to just be certified and be treated as a medical device. So this is a more formal way to show the requirements. Also, it's up to the team to decide. Some people just are more used to using SRSs rather than just tickets. Also, it depends on the methodology used or models. If it's more waterfall projects, there will be like a long documents that is created all beforehand, and then it's being worked on. With Agile, of course, this is a less useful tool, although I still think that having certain product functionality description is a good thing. Either it's in a SRS or it's in a, like you say, in Confluence, in some shared location like Wiki, where you can find how the system works. That is really helpful because tickets, as you know, yeah, or user stories, if you create just what needs to be changed or added right now, and then add it right now, it's very difficult to just to find the complete information. How does the system works? What is the correct behavior? So the SRS is one of the ways to keep this product functionality description from version to version. We just update it, and keep it in its current state, but also we can have a version history so we can see stable versions of the documents. It's about versioning, management of requirements. This is the example of Carl Wiggers. We can review it a little bit later. Yeah, basically it's a template or filled-in template that has all the same fields that were shown here. Let's go further to the requirement documents that can be requirement documents, where they are used, or even not only requirements, but not only documents, but just requirements. They're used throughout the entire software development, right? They are used for planning when we decide, okay, we have either it's a ticket or it's a certain documents that we had with the team, that we discussed it, or did a backlog refinement session, previously called grooming, and then we can plan it for the upcoming some period of time. It is a basis for architectural design. It is a basis for implementation. It is a basis for testing, because we derive the documentation, the test cases, test plans from the requirements. And I see the raised hand from Tatiana. Yes, you have a comment?
Mm-hmm. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you think, does it make sense to write a SRS document by reviewing implemented tickets?
You mean afterwards, right?
Yes, afterwards. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Does it make sense?
I do think it still makes sense for, first of all, for this knowledge base updating. Of course, it will then not be used by developers. It's more of, okay, we have the up-to-date documentation that describes how the system works at this moment, the latest state. And I can actually share how we do it in my team right now. We do in this way. So we are a medical product from one hand, and we need to have these formal documents. But on the other hand, we're also going agile. We are working according to the Scrum, and passing the transformation. It's a constant process of getting closer and closer to the ideal of agile. So what I wanted to say, that we are using the user stories, and we have. We don't use Jira, we use TFS. So we have items in the TFS. It's a user story that is estimated, that is described. And we do plan our sprint using the user stories. And the team is working with the user stories. So it's a main source of information throughout the implementation. But when the implementation is being finalized, and we've clarified the details, there are already no questions open for the user story, because at the beginning we have plenty of them. And after we clarify the details, we just update our product SRSs, product meaning that it has the complete description of the system's features, and make sure that, okay, our documentation is now up to date. Why we don't do it immediately or in parallel? Because we've seen it as a double work. Because you get your user story updated, and then you need to update the document as well. And it's a lot of iterations. Every time you get some update in user story, then you have to update the SRS. And we decided that we will have just one source of ground truth information, which would be the user story during implementation. So it makes sense to maintain some knowledge base, the baseline of how the system works. Did I answer your question? or maybe you have some extra.
Maybe it will be better to have some wiki pages, not in the form of this SRS document.
Well, it depends.
It would be better to have wiki pages, no?
It depends on your project. If you don't require to show this to your auditors, if you have certain regulations to follow, if you don't have any commitments for your customers and they can review this wiki, or they just also don't care about it much, if you just use your user story completely for all of the other tasks, then you can simplify it to wiki. Of course, it's not about format, it's about just having somewhere a description of your requirements for the system. So if you can change it. I was just referring to that. Sometimes it's not possible. For instance, when you need to have it somewhere written down and put in specific place, that, for instance, in medical regulation, you would even, for FDA, you need to actually physically print all of documentation for the project and send it to USA for review. And with wiki pages, it would be possible, but it's not according to certain standardized procedure. Do you have maybe some other things? Okay, thank you. All right, change management, system usage and system maintenance, contract management. These are all the places where we also can use the requirements documents. Let's discuss a little bit the quality criteria for requirements documents, or just for requirements. Do you have any idea when you are reviewing the requirements, which aspects do you notice, or just comment usually?
That it should be testable, for example, or what do you mean? Something like this?
It's more about testable. It's a good one as well, so that it can be implemented, can be tested. Yes, so some other things, for instance, for how well it is understood, or is there any unclearness, or you can interpret it in a different way. Some fullness, consistency, atomic. Okay, atomic would be for user stories, or the tasks, if it's not formalized exactly as. All right, thank you for the answers. Let's go over some of them and discuss. So for requirements documents, if we're collecting some storage, either it's a SRS document or it's a wiki page, so somewhere where we have several requirements, it's important that there's a clear structure, so you know where to find what. It will be as applicable for wiki as for the more formalized documents. It should be rather easy to modify and extend these documents if we need it. So sections should be clear, and it should be complete, of course. So the information that's added there is complete. All needs requirements are described. It should be traceable in a sense that we should understand what documents came before and were input for the SRS, and which documents follow and derive some information from it. And it should not be ambiguous, meaning that one person understands these requirements in one way, the other one in the other way. And both of them can be right just because of some specifics of language, words used, or incomplete information, and etc. And it should be consistent, meaning that one part of the document requirements should not mention, for instance, that the allowed range for this value is from 0 to 100, And in the other chapter, we say that allowed range is from 0 to 1000. So there should be no contradictions. It should be consistent in the information. And then for the specific, for the separate requirements, so for these every statement, there are following following quality criteria I mentioned. So they should be agreed. So in a sense that our stakeholders did approve and agreed on this formulation and on this requirement in general. Unambiguous that we mentioned for documents, it's same applicable for a separate requirement, just as that we say as a statement. They are necessary. That's in a sense that we don't implement something that is actually not requested by anybody and not needed by any business or technical reason. So it's just a waste of time. There should be consistent, verifiable. So this is the testable. We should be able to test it. We should be able to implement it, feasible. So the requirements should be verified together with the team that is feasible and can be actually done. Traceable, complete, and understandable. These are the things that we look at, and it's useful to just keep in mind this maybe as a checklist when we are reviewing, for instance, the documents that's requirements, and the person in the requirements who did the requirements engineering tasks provided that every of these aspects can be explicitly checked, whether it is met or not. Then some guidance on understandability of the requirements. There should be short sentences and short paragraphs, because human brain cannot store that much memory at the time, and it's also difficult to find it. Just to find where does one piece of information ends, the other one starts. So rather, the simpler the better, and formulate only one requirement per sentence, in the sense that if we try to include all the conditions, all the details into just one sentence, some of the parts can be lost, because it's again the way how we interpret and perceive the information. And it would be nice to just split it up to every single constraint or a statement should be a separate requirement, separate sentence. And then, do you have any questions maybe or comments for the quality criteria before we move on? I see that, Tatiana, you have a raised hand still, but it's from the previous time, no? Minus, okay. Okay, let's then continue. If you have any, please ask. The glossary, another thing to tackle. It's a document that is useful for every team member, and ideally should be used by the whole team. That whole team should know of its existence, and that if there is any question of certain term or abbreviation or meaning of the word, then the team can check it up in the glossary document. The glossary document is basically a collection of definitions, terms, abbreviations, context-specific terms relevant for this project, some concepts, synonyms, homonyms that are used in the team, and maybe some conventions, which of these synonyms are most frequently used. Because if we use too many synonyms, it will be still confusing. What do we mean by it here or in the other place of our documentation? So these kind of guidelines can be added, and basically it should be centrally managed, in a sense that there should be just one document for glossary. There shouldn't be multiple main glossary documents. There can be a higher level glossary that covers a couple of projects, and then some low levels or more details per team, for example, that's possible, but they will be linked, refer one to another, and don't duplicate information from one to another. But usually it's like one actual up-to-date glossary. There should be some responsible person for maintaining this glossary. It can be actually, it depends on how the team decides. It can be the person who is working with requirements, or it can be, for instance, technical writer, it can be also test engineer, whoever prefers it, but usually it's more tightly connected to the person who is working with the requirements. It should be, of course, up to date and should be maintained throughout the project. When we add something new or remove, we should update the glossary in the same way. It should be available to all relevant stakeholders, to the team members, to our business stakeholders, to once again align on the understanding of the terms. As soon as we introduce the glossary for usage, it should be obligatory for using, and it should contain also the sources of the terms we used. We should approve this glossary with the stakeholders to be sure the terms we use they are correct. And should also use some consistent structure. For example, like this, we should have an alphabet with just links to the specific to the word that starts on this with this letter, and we can, for instance, structure the terms in this alphabetical order and style them in a consistent way. So here we have the term in bolds, and then the text in certain with certain alignments, and somewhere we have also the cursive used, italic used. So that is about glossary. Also a useful document and helps greatly with removing the ambiguity or misunderstanding between within the team and between the teams as well. Subjective perception. This is what I was referring to. Ambiguity, quality criteria. That even if we write the same text, one person will interpret it in one way, the other in another, and that's can be both correct. So that's why it's important to verify that understanding is shared and is common, is the same between two people. So some of the transformational effects of the natural language, because this happens more with the text rather than with modeling, that the text can be quite ambiguous for people who review it. And some of the effects we'll review further. Nominalization. Nominalization is when we write requirements, when certain large process is just mentioned as a singular word, as one word. For instance, we just specify the input is provided to the system, and it's not clear which input it is, right? So we have to, or the terms, in case of system crash, a restart of the system shall be performed. So that the term crash, restart, describe like a large process. So they should be somewhere separately described, because otherwise the requirement would not be complete, because the crash and restart can be interpreted differently by different readers. Transformational effects. When we are specifying nouns with missing reference. So we just say the data, the function, user, the controller, something similar with the process when we're just describing it's very in a generic way. And here, again, missing certain information. So for instance, the data shall be displayed to the user on the terminal. Which data, which user? So this is missing information that we should add up. And instead, we should say the system shall display the billing data to the registered user on a terminal she is logged into. So that this is a more complete requirement, and it's clear which scenario it is. And when we are reviewing the requirements, I know that test engineers you have an eye on looking at these corner cases constraints, and that's a very nice thing to always to collaborate and to take into account that such effects may take place. So it's also a good reminder to have like somewhere a checklist is also a good idea when reviewing the requirements. Again, the amounts and frequencies that are used with universal quantifiers. For instance, no, none, every, all, some, nothing, and it's a trigger word that should bring up a question. Really, all, really, never. There are these generic words should raise some awareness, because that may mean that we just didn't analyze the requirement fully yet, and it was just easier to say all, but it may be still not all the time like that. So it's a trigger word to review. For instance, the system shall show all data sets in every submenu. So really all data sets, really every submenu. So in this case, and with such requirements, really should then the requirements engineer would go through every menu and see if all data sets need to be shown there. And maybe the requirement will be more detailed after that. Incompletely specified conditions. So when we're explaining what should occur when condition is met, but don't explain what should be when it's not met. An example, if the restaurants shall offer all beverages to a registered guest over the age of 20 years. But what happens when with the user who is less than 20, who is 20 years or younger? So we need to then have two requirements. The alcohol-free beverages can be sold to any registered users younger than 21 years, and all beverages, including alcoholic, to any user over the age of 20. That would be a more complete requirement. And incomplete process words. So the word transmits, we need to add information. What is transmitted, from where, and to where. Also, another thing, when reviewing the requirements, it's a bit more tricky and difficult to understand when we are using the passive voice. For instance, to log a user in, the login data is entered. Instead, it should be, we can use the active voice instead, and it will sound like the system must allow the user to enter his username and password using the keyboard on the terminal. It's more clear who does what. The system will allow user to enter his username, and the user will type it in. So also some core of the requirements, the legal obligation. I'm sorry, this is something extra. Now let's go over the two most popular or widespread ways of documenting the requirements, and also try to compare them one to another. The user story and the use case. The user story is a format frequently used in Agile, although it's not a must-have, but it's a nice guiding standard there. Which is a short, simple description of a feature told from the perspective of the person in a specific format. We will see it later. And use case, that describes activity that an actor would be a user or other system that is connecting and interacting with ours, can perform to achieve some outcome of value. So let's start with the user story. User story, and I think you already may know this, have a description as a user. I want to, so that. And they can be just written on sticky notes and kept in a shoebox, or they can be written down in a Jira or in a TFS or Azure DevOps, the new name is. And basically, this card can be just already enough without any other details. But some teams and they can prefer to add some extra details in a description. And they would be called the acceptance criteria or conditions of satisfaction according to the latest terminology from MikeCon. The sequences, they can be used just in free text, the description, or it can be structured as a scenarios: given, when, then, and that would be one of the examples of a user story. So the title is just a short, concise description what this story is about, recovering the password. Then a user story is, as a user, I want to be able to recover the password to my account so that I will be able to access my account in case I forgot the password. And again, this is important to say that user story and a user and the real motivation, the very basic thing why the user needs something, they're not necessarily they don't match, because user story would include in this first part a pointer to the solution already, while when we will be talking about the user needs, what does the user need, it will be not connected to the solution. Just a small remark. So here we also have the acceptance criteria with the scenario structured, given, when, and would be connecting several smaller parts. Scenario: forgot password. The user has navigated to the login page. When the user selected forgot password option and entered a valid email, then the system sent the link to the entered email. So it's like user system scenario. It's not always practical to use them, these strict orders. Sometimes it can be also replaced or combined with just simple text with acceptance criteria. Some small comments also on the quality criteria for user story. There was a comment atomic. Indeed, for user stories, there's this concept that's called INVEST. It's a acronym for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small, and testable. So I've seen the message. I will cover it right now. So yeah, these are the criteria, and small would be equal to atomic. The question: how to understand that the user story needs to be split into a smaller one? Do we need to describe positive and negative checks in different user stories? That's a good question. It depends a little bit on your team, and I guess it's connected to the size. So in general, user story shouldn't be, for example, larger than to implement than one sprint. So one sprint can be from 1 to 3 weeks. So let's say that user story can last for these 3 weeks, but that maybe is a bit too much. It depends. So we should always refer to several criteria. So also there's a large graph here, how to split a user story. There are some patterns. You can find it also in the internet and read it through a bit more detail. So you see, evaluate the split. Are the new stories roughly equal in size? Yes. In each story, is each story about 1/10, 1/6 of your velocity, team velocity? Yes. Do each of the stories satisfy INVEST? Yes. If no, we'll go a bit later. Other stories you can deprioritize or delete. Is there any obvious story to start with that gets you early value learning risk mitigation, etc. Yeah, I think. And you're done, though you could try another pattern to see if it works better. Try another pattern, try another pattern. So we would look into how big it is in the size. Does it meet the invest criteria? So it should, from one hand, serve some user value, because if it's a user story about, we will do this first small technical block of it, user will not get anything yet, and it's not a technical task, it's really new functionality, but we just do some basis that will not provide any value. In that sense, it's too small of a user story, although, yeah, there can be enablers, but it's then a combination of the size related to your team's velocity, or the size of the sprint, and the value that we bring to the user. And also if we are able to split it up in smaller pieces. If we can, that's a good way, good thought then to split it up. So you see this valuable stands for valuable for the user. Independency is also important. If we split up to two separate user stories, where we have in one user story we have a positive scenario and in the other negative, and we understand that the first person that will implement this will immediately enable positive and negative checks, and we just more artificially split it up to test the negative and positive in different user story, then maybe it doesn't make sense. But at the same time, if you have a user story for functionality, where in the first one you really implement some MVP that it will already work, but some corner cases would not work correctly, or some error handling is not perfect, then you can split up the error handling, like additional value for the user will be a clearer clearer troubleshooting. But yeah, if it can be split up and it's a rather large effort, in this case, we can, I think, split them up. So as a guidance, you can use these questions. So testable also, if it's like some technical enabler that we do, it's not testable, it's not valuable for the user, then it doesn't make sense to keep such a user story. I hope I replied to your question. Please let me know if you have some additional questions. Okay, I will continue in the meantime, and we'll get to the exercise very soon. User story mapping is a technique to visually represent the user stories or epics that we have in the projects, so for our product, and to prioritize it on a still rather high level, features, releases, and sprints. And it's a great tool to work with stakeholders because it's quite visual, it's easy to understand, and we'll see it in a second also in the mirror board. So we have a following structure for the user story mapping technique. At the top, we have certain generic goal for the software. And at the bottom, we have, so it will be the top horizontal line. And then underneath, we put certain, either it's an epic or a theme activity. So still a high level functionality of the system related to this goal. And then we have rows of releases. For example, MVP first version will have user stories related to Epic 1, to here in this example to each one, but yeah, let me do it like this. So in the MVP, we will not cover the Epic, this one, the third one, but we'll cover the first, second, and the fourth one. And in version 2.0, we'll add one other user story for this one, for the Epic theme number 3. This is not a replacement of the backlog and the standard ways to plan the releases. This is more of a workshop tool to align with the stakeholders, because it has such a nice visibility to it. But of course, the real backlog will be still, it's a good idea to still keep it. And now let's go to the Miro board. Hope you have entered that one already. And I can see Tatiana, but I don't see Julia yet. If you can enter
For
it.
some reason, I am not able to open it. It doesn't want to open, so I will be passive listener today.
Oh,
I tried everything, even to clear cache in other browser, but it doesn't want to work.
I see. But it just the Miro in general, or just this?
In
page?
general, I tried
In
even
general.
my own board.
Okay, okay, strange. Whoa, but yeah, let's then do it together and look at this example here. So here we have some cards. It's a tool for in Miro we have really a template for this user story map, and here we can see an example for the booking application. So there is the high level, as you can see, the goal, activity, user story, the goal, activity, user story, the goal, booking and accommodation, like a really something long that lasts throughout the projects. Book a transport, provide accommodations, really blocks of the system. And then we have epics, search for an accommodation, view the accommodation profile, sign up for account, etc., etc. And here we can also add some details by expanding it. And then we have user stories. We can drag them from one place to the other. For example, user story, enter filter details, city, dates, number of people. Version MVP. Version 2 would be enter details about already filter based on a hotel, apartment, house, or hostel type of the apartment. And then there can be a backlog like this where we can add something new if we need to. So the exercise that I wanted to suggest you to do, but then perhaps Tatiana, you can still try it out for yourself. You can pick any card, any user story, and try to fill it in here. So you can see, for example, log in with the email and password. Fill the structure. As a user, I want to, so that, to do a little bit brainstorm what it can be for the user. Why? What is it that he needs, or and why he needs that? You can maybe also, I can open it up. Maybe we can try it out together. So let's look at this one, at this example. Or if Julia, you want to comment, let's do that as well. You can unmute yourself.
As user, I want to be able to log in with, to my account with my password and my email. If I understand it correctly, what we need to do.
To log in with the email password, my account, and why?
So that I even don't know. I am able to access my account.
Well, yes. What are other reasons? Is it the goal of the user to access the account, or maybe the goal is maybe to book an accommodation or to search for an accommodation, access the
system maybe, and then it depends.
System. Yeah, it's very still high level, but yeah, the real reason, and it's an interesting, just I thought that first of all, user stories trigger us to think why does the user need this? Not just he needs that or this, but also why. And the other thing is in this why part, it's important not to rephrase what we've just indicated in I want to. It's not that I want to be able to log in with the email and password to be able to log in with the email and password, something like that. Well, of course, I'm exaggerating a bit, but yeah, that's the idea. Okay, and as for this formulation, we can also put, if we identify the user personas that we were mentioning last time on Tuesday, we can also use the specific user persona to refer to. So as a user, let's call him Maria. Okay, Maria, I thought of Mario, but Maria, we will mention like working mom, for example, or the world traveler. So somebody who's very actively traveling. We want to be able to log in with the email and password to my account to be able to access the booking system. Yes, Tatiana, your question?
I want to ask why we need to have such specified user.
It's needed when you have multiple of them and they are different in a sense that they will need different tools. For instance, you have a type user of your system, you have a user persona administrator, you have a persona like with the booking, you have a persona of the one who rents the apartment. So he or she books some accommodation. And you have the landlords that will put it on a rent. And it's important to just understand for whom we are creating this user story, for which type of profile. Or yeah, so with world traveler, we have a different place where we will have description of each of these user stories. So user persona, so we don't have to specify everything in this part. But it's optional. It's not that it should be always present. If you are in a context and you know that, yeah, this is your typical user that you have, and it's, for example, in this block of user stories, it's always this one. You can put it on a level of epic, and then not repeat it in every user story. I hope your question is answered. All right. Any questions about the user story mapping and the user stories? Any additional questions? Okay, then I suggest yes, chat minus. Okay, thank you very much for your questions. That's very nice that you are being active. Let's have a short break for about maybe 5 minutes. And let's continue at 9 minutes or 10 minutes from now. I mean, in 10 past 8. All right. See you.
Okay, see you soon.
See you soon. All right. So we'll continue in just a few seconds. I will also share the screen. So let's continue. I also mentioned the software requirements specification template. So just very quickly browsing through that one to have a more overview for that one. So the chapters that we were discussing previously, the revision history where we can track the changes, and all of these chapters have a description what exactly we expect to see here. This is all not written in stone. It's never is. It can be modified and adapted. And some companies, there may be already used some template for documentation for SRSs in use. So that one, if it's adopted by the company, then maybe that one would be more mandatory. So you see, but but once again, it's all discussable. It's always good to challenge whether this is applicable for us, this is needed for us, isn't it creating some overheads? So in Agile, as you probably know, there's a principle that working product is above the full documentation. So this principle is nice to keep in mind for requirements engineering as well, in terms of if we do some things just because we have such a process and they're not really needed to anyone, but it's not obvious that they're needed. It's a good idea to keep a critical eye on some things that are done, or the approaches in especially in documentation. So if there can be some simplifications, that's always a good thing, because there's more important things. There are always a lot of things that we can do instead that would bring more value. All right, so let's move on with the use cases and review this technique and how is it different, and is it better when it's why, and etc. So use case is a bit more voluminous, has more volume to its technique. So it has it's like a table with fields for certain different aspects of set of user scenarios. So it would describe a certain specific usage case, right? So some aspect of the system, and also oriented on the user. So what the user can achieve with the system. So it also has certain focus on the user, and from use case, then requirements and other documentation can be elicited and derived from. Template of specification, which we'll see right now, has certain chapters, certain logical blocks. First is attributes for like IDs of this case, management attributes, attributes for description, so the body of it, and specific use case attributes. This is the part of the table. So we have it's really described as this table, and we have part of identifier, name, authors, priority, criticality, source, responsible. That would be all the management attributes, because they would refer to something not functional, but more process-wise or organization-wise. Then we have the body with trigger events, what specific condition that occurs triggers this use case to start, actors, which other systems or our users are involved in execution of these scenarios. Then pre and post conditions, what happens before what should already happen before the use case execution, and what will happen after. And result is what happens as a result of the use case. And then we have three different types of scenarios: main scenario, or happy path scenario, or main success scenario, some different words can be used, is a scenario that happens in a normal circumstances, in the most ideal, when no errors nor go to the sites occurs. I guess it's quite clear for you, because it's related in a way to how we also test the system. So there's a like best case, and then there's some alternative and exception scenarios. And alternative with exception, do you know what would be the difference? Can you maybe all you already know, or can you guess?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's okay. Jana? Maybe comment. Okay, I will not keep the intrigue any longer. So alternative scenario is the one that will happen with certain certain steps aside from the best scenario. So for instance, user passes through steps, but then decides to go back and forth, undo, redo, do some extra clicks somewhere here and there, or some extra conditions happen with the user's actions. But then as a result, user gets to the same place where user with the main scenario will be. So if it's a certain data calculation, it will be calculated. If it's entering certain page, certain screen, it will be entered just in a different way. While exception scenarios is a scenario when a user stops somewhere on the way. So he gets an error or exits the system, or something goes wrong, or not wrong, but just completely not finishing this scenario. So it's some exceptions that happens along the way. And the difference is that we don't reach the same result as a main scenario in the exception scenarios. And some qualities, it's the linkage to the quality requirements that there may be applicable for this use case. Some example, as we can see here, an ID, UC stands for use case, just abbreviation, and we have name of the use case, again, like title of user story, a short explanation what it is about to quickly grasp the information, authors of it, priority, criticality, source from whom it comes from together with whom we've elicited it, responsible, description, and we see some explanation of it's a navigate to destination use case. So the trigger event is driver wishes to navigate to his destination. So it's just a wish of the user in this case. So nothing really physical nothing really happening in the system, but it's an intention of the user. And actors is driver, traffic information service, GPS satellite system. Precondition, we have the system activated. Post condition, the driver reaches to his destination. And the result of the use case is that we have a road guidance to this destination. So we created the roads. And then there's main alternatives, exceptions, scenarios here. And you see they're also numbered. And with alternative scenario, we see that it starts from 4A. It means that first three steps are done the same as in main scenario. And then the bifurcation, the split happens on a step 4. And we would indicate what happens then after the step 4 with this alternative scenario. And then the exception, we just mentioned that navigation system does not receive a GPS signal. And yeah, that's all. We just cannot create a route in this case. Some pros and cons of user story and use case that we were discussing, and we can now look at it. The user story has a still more strong connection to what user needs and to the user. It focused on the value. It's faster to create because writing this one sentence plus maybe some acceptances, it's not very, as I mentioned, guided that you should have this many acceptance criteria. You can have non-acceptance criteria and still consider it a valid user story. So they're faster. They're easier to review by business stakeholders, and they're easier for managing the backlog and prioritizing the item. While the cons is that we don't have the entire description. We may have almost no description, right? And it makes it less predictable. Some risks may appear. Although, yeah, the user story, it's never complete without the discussion done for it. So it's just a pointer on some real requirement. And that's why at the beginning, when we were discussing, does it make sense to have a document if we have this SRS document, when we have the user stories or tickets, then it's a nice way to still maintain some wiki page or some knowledge base for the functionalities of the system to have a long-term full picture. So we maybe need to combine it with something else. And we can also to overlook something because there is no structure that we should follow. So things like exceptions, cases, or certain aspects of alternative scenario can be missed. So for instance, for the team, for test engineers, there will be more work to make sure not everything is tested fully, and for developer to make sure everything implemented according to expectations. But it's more focused on the communication rather than documentation with the user story. Well, use cases, we have a complete explanation, more complete. It's a rather good basis for development because they have more information at the start. We can better understand the system work, and we can, since it's formulated as a checklist almost, we are more sure that we didn't miss some important requirements. It of course takes longer. You need to fill out all those fields, even if you skip some of these management parts, because you will create it in your tickets, the task, or in the document. But still, describing these sections would take longer than creating a user story, and it's more difficult for business stakeholders. And there's a risk of too much documentation, yes, and doing the things that maybe can be skipped. So it's up to the person who works with the requirements to decide, but also it's more agreement within the whole team, and together with also some company practices, which of the methods of documentation to use. We mentioned that it may be also related to some common practices and standard operational procedures. It may be connected to some regulations connected to this product. It may be connected to the methodology used. But one thing is stays the same: if we don't specify, if we don't follow the rules and the quality criteria, the software may be as a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, like in Forrest Gump. Let's look at the practice of use case. If you have any questions, please ask in the meantime. So what this exercise is supposed to be about? We will maybe do it together as well, but I would be expecting that you would comment. I can type it in, or Tatiana, if you want, you can type it in, but let's make it a group work, because otherwise Julia will not be able to participate when there will be a part of working separately. So the exercise here is following. We would like to write a use case for the tool in Miro on this board that's called mind map. If we put 3 dots, if we click the 3 dots button here, and we will see the list of the other add-ons, the tools, that's elements that can be added in Miro, and we see the mind map. If we click there, we have a cursor with mind map. If we click again, we see the elements that we can add. And our goal is to describe the use case for adding of mind map onto the Miro board. So you've seen how it was done. How would you describe the main scenario of what we just did? Any thoughts or any questions?
If we talk about that, like we already had preconditions that we are logged in and etc. So first step will be to click on 3 dots.
Okay, the user, then what the user does.
Like click on 3 dots on the panel.
Yeah, that's the on the left
panel.
panel. Okay, and you can see here that it's another way to structure the use case, to have a user and a system in 2 columns. And then it's a trigger for us not to forget to write down what is the system reaction to user actions. So what does the system? Yes?
More tools are opened, I think, or something like this, because I don't know how it is called. Because
yeah, of course, it's called apps here.
So
The
apps are open.
Apps list menu list. I don't know. Context menu, maybe it's a menu list is opened. Okay. Then what happens next? Maybe Yulia? Tatiana? Sorry, Yulia.
User click on mind map.
On mind map. Okay, yes. And what does the system do?
System shows the kind of form.
It's we can say it's a cursor, yeah. Shows mind map cursor, something like that, maybe. Okay, Yulia, maybe you can continue the third one. What then the user
User clicks on board.
Any place or just on board?
I think on board, because we don't know, like on some particular place on board. Like yes, and system creates. I don't know how it is even called. Maybe
rounded shape.
Maybe we can say something like mind map blank elements, and then somewhere in requirements we should specify exactly what it entails, because it would be rather big description to put into this scenario. So we can just call it in the same way as we will call it where we will describe, for instance, user interface. Or yeah, rounded shape. That's a good description, but what I'm trying to say, it may be not enough, right? It's not only rounded, even it has certain color, it has this type something inside, it has these pluses outside. Then if we just put it and see, yeah, the cursor is immediately in the first element. And this panel is also visualized. So it's kind of needs separate description, perhaps, to describe all of these details. But if the details are not, if there are not a lot, then we can, of course, put it here as well.
Maybe it would be first element of mind map, maybe in such a way.
Or blank starting elements. First, yeah, starting. Well, whatever it will be called, or yeah, it's a matter of terminology. Yeah, we would need to agree with the team. How do we call this one? Is it the start? Is it the first one? Is it the main one? Already 3 different options, or probably more. Starting. Let's just do starting map. Okay, and then let's also do something like type something. Or yeah, then we can maybe not type it, but then user can type the name of the text inside the first element, the text is filled in. Can you think of alternative scenarios for this use case? This is our main one. What can the user do differently to achieve the same result?
I don't know about Miro so much.
Let's
think-
review together.
I think a user can click when a cursor of mind map appeared. User can click not left mouse button, but right mouse button.
Right mouse on this one doesn't do anything for me, at least. But he can, for example, search. It's another way. Or I believe there was also template. Yeah, templates, where you can search it and also find it like this. See, use or preview, use pre-filled one, use blank template. If I click use blank, you see it's even different behavior. It's already creates this structure. So that could be an alternative case for us. And we can also describe it in the same way that a result is the same. We have almost the same, even if we generalize it to blank template, then it's, yeah, the Miro, the mind map is added, but it's, we didn't add the first starting elements, but actually some more to fill in. How would you, is it clear, the concept of alternative scenario for you? Just to understand if we further continue on it or move on.
Alternative scenario, it's not a deviation of each step, no?
Not necessarily. It's like a different path that the user can take to reach the same result. So he's working with the mind map tool to add it, and there are multiple ways to do it. And we would, the simplest, the fastest is like 2 clicks, 1, 2. So we can consider it as a main, but there is some other tool. For instance, if it wouldn't be in this visible here, maybe user would need to type in mind to search it and then click. So some extra, you see a deviation here, that it's still clicking on 3 dots. Then after the 1, we would make 2A to type in mind map, and then it clicks. So we would use 2A, user types in the mind, in the mind text, in the search field. And assuming that we already have somewhere requirements or use case described for this all functionality in the left panel. So we just refer to it, then we will be dependent and related to this functionality with this use case. Types in mind, system shows the results that correspond to mind text and show the mind map elements. And then actually, yeah, we just stop, because after that, the 3 and the 4 will be the same. So it's like a small deviation, and then we go back to the main scenario, and we'll see in diagrams that we'll still look at today how that can be visually depicted with the activity diagram. Is it clear? I will repeat the question for alternative scenarios. Is it the concept? Is it clear?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Fills in text. elements. And now let's think about exception scenarios. What can go wrong that we don't reach the result of user has mind map on the board with filled in text in the first elements, because this is our first one. We can just type them in the stickers without very detailed scenarios. Any ideas? What can go wrong with the web application?
We don't have internet.
Yes, for example, no internet, or some unknown error that, for instance, you're experiencing right now. If that happens, you cannot access the board. Access to the mural or the board. That may be also connected with some rights, user rights. But yeah, we're not talking about some specific one, but in general, no, if no access to the functionality, but that's mainly a bug even. Anything else? All right, maybe let's continue further. Well, in general, yeah, that's true. It's something that's, for instance, and that would be exception scenario. That's if in the progress we lose the internet or we lose the access to mural due to some reason. In that case, we just end up without fulfilling the scenario, but it's usually more helpful to add some more specific things. Yeah, internet would be just common thing. And here, for example, we don't have some enough. Oh, for instance, it's a paid feature and we don't have we have a free account. So the feature will be non-available. It's like, it would be an exception, but yeah, with free and paid features, it's rather another precondition. It's rather a precondition that a user has a proper license to access the functionality. So it's not an exception. Exception is rather when something goes wrong in the process and it could have been completed, but something really blocks. All right, precondition. I already mentioned about
Logged in user.
Yeah. It's a free feature, so there shouldn't be paid account. Logged in user, open board, so it should be on a board, obviously. Post condition.
Mind map is created. I don't know.
I think rather mind map created is a result of our use case, and here post condition, it's user, yeah. So with the example of traffic, that user got to the destination, and the result was the route that we created. So result of the system is so mind map is added, and post condition as we can, for example, add more elements to the created mind maps, or we can work further with the mind map. Or for instance, there are some, it's post condition is more that certain maybe other scenarios or some other tools become enabled, or maybe even are triggered and are possible to continue with. So here, I'm not sure if I know Miro that deep to know what is unblocked.
As I saw after you wrote some text, your cursor was changed from Miro, from this mind map, for example. It can be post condition.
I guess it's rather inside of our use case when we are, so it will be here, create a starting element of the mind map, changes, because it's still connected to all of the action of adding the elements. And then post condition is rather something more separated. So something less, not specifically maybe for this functionality, but something close to it. For instance, if we add a new element or new object in some product, that other tools that work with this element or with this object become available. If we, for example, had some eraser for the mind map, maybe that one becomes enabled. So something like that. And the changes back to regular. And of course, yeah, the types of cursor should be additionally described. All right, let's move on with the modeling. If there are no questions for this part, is it clear? This?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Using of requirement models. As we mentioned before, requirement models could be a nice way to replace or be combined together with the textual descriptions, because it will add more clarity and some more structure for everybody, and yeah, for the people who will review it, and hopefully remove some ambiguity to the requirements. A model is an abstract representation of the reality of the existing one, or the one that we're going to create, so the one that we're going to implement. Some important terms that I was using even earlier as syntax and semantics, probably not new for you. So syntax is defines which modeling elements are allowed in this diagram, and semantics means what do they mean, each of these elements. It's two important terms of the modeling. So one of the most popular maybe languages for modeling is UML, Unified Modeling Language. It combines a set of different diagrams that are partially complementary. So some of the elements are overlapping, and they allow to, and the UML allows to cover a rather wide variety of things that you can model, that you can describe there. Latest version 2.5.1, and was created by the Object Management Group in January '97. As we mentioned, it can be shared across the team, not only to developers, but also to business users. And we would use it to help with reviewing the requirements, with implementing them, with documenting them for the long term as well. Especially it's useful when we have quite a complex relations between the classes in a project, or just different classes that need to be somehow visualized, and how do they relate one to the other. That would be Uml Class Diagram. We need to show all of the use cases. So we just were reviewing this single use case textual, and in the system there will be plenty of use cases. So we need to somehow also show which use cases there are and how do they relate one to another. That would be a use case diagram also of UML. Then the flow, these main alternative scenarios, can be depicted with the activity diagram that helps us to build up this flow. And then there's data flow, and it's a little bit, can be sometimes confusing that data flow doesn't actually shows you the strict sequence of the passing through sequence of executing some actions, it would be the activity diagrams tool. And data flow helps us to visualize just in general the flow of the data between the system and external elements, and how do they relate from one to another. There's also umldiagrams.org resource, which is very nice and useful resource that you can dive deeper in and see much more examples of different diagrams and their syntax and semantics. There's also UML at a glance documents that provides, like, it's a really nice one. You can also find it at I can attach it maybe in the Miro. It's available on the internet and free. I can attach it so you can also use it. It's like a cheat sheet with overview of the most used UML diagrams with their syntax semantics. So it's quite helpful. Use case. Let's review now the use case diagram. We've seen the use case textual description, and now there's a use case diagrams that I mentioned. It allows us to show all of the use cases or part of use cases that happen in the system and their relations between each other. What are the key elements of the syntax and what is their meaning, their semantics? There are objects and relations in the use case diagram. So objects are use case at this specific usage, specific thing that the user can do or other system can do or will happen in a system. Then there's an actor, so it's an external person or a system, and it's depicted with this human body visualization. An alternative notation for the actor is in a box, and then we'll in quotes put actor. And if it's a system depicted as a person, then we would put in quotes system. We also would use a square to define the system boundary. It will become more clear what is then. Here they look the same size, but this one would actually cover up the boundaries of the entire system and will include a lot of use cases. And relations. There is a number of relations. We connect the use cases with two types, with even few more, but these are two the main ones, let's say, most often used, extend and include. And the communication between actor and the use case is just a line without any errors. Include and extend has a dotted line and the arrow in certain direction. And let's see what does it entail, this direction, and what does it mean. So extend relation means that the use case A in this case extends some interaction sequence in use case B. And it would be triggered by some condition. So it means that there is a use case B that can run without use case A, but in certain condition, use case A can be included between step B and C. So it's an extra thing that can happen or not. While the include relation is, it means that in this case, use case A, and you see that it's vice versa, the direction, that use case B, which is this 4 steps, includes the use case A inside of it, and it's a non-retractable part of it. And this is used rather to indicate some significant part of the use case B that actually can be run independently, or just, it's important to show it separately. While extend can happen or not. There's also a generalization which helps us to show some more generic high-level use case and then more specific ones that are generalized by the general one. For example, we have an actor order register clerk that participates in the use case place order. And then there are two more specific use cases: phone order or internet order. So you see they are generalized with place order and order register class, then interacts with both of these. And why do we need to split it up? Because we have different customers interacting with this different more lower level use cases. So a regular customer would be interacting with the phone order use case, and an internet customer with the internet order. It's depicted with the line and this non-filled arrow. This is one of the examples of the navigation system. Let's see what we see here. So this is the boundary of the system, this outer border, and inside we have a number of use cases: navigate to destination, and we see the condition of extension points. So extend will happen when we select the avoid congestion option, and then the use case of download traffic information will be also executed. If not, it will be just skipped. And then navigate to destination is rather a large use case. So it includes retrieve current position, and it includes input destination, and it will run both of them when it will be executed. Driver has some connection with the use cases. And then there's two systems that are actors: traffic information system and GPS satellite system. So this is a very visual way to show which elements there are in the system, and to review and discuss with the team, with the stakeholders. Another thing is that this one is quite helpful at the beginning of the project, when we are just trying to understand what it is that the system should do. Do you have any comments or questions? Have you used the use cases, or have you reviewed them with your teams?
Not in my project.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. We don't use not UML diagrams, not use cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, so it's of course a matter of learning the syntax and semantics, as I mentioned, with the team. I mean, so that everybody, if you want to introduce diagramming, that may take some time on knowledge sharing, but at the same time, as you can see now, in just the basic concept can be really expressed and understood quite soon without diving deeper. There are different diagrams. Some of them are a bit easier, some of them a bit harder, but yeah, it's a good way, especially when you have quite complex data. That's a great tool. It seems that, yeah, it feels that it takes more time to create, but it also helps the person who creates it to see what information was still missing. So it's a nice thing to use. Do you use UML or use case in your medical project? Well, we do use diagrams from time to time. I cannot say that I use it for every requirement, but when it's needed, it helps. It is helpful. Like for instance, activity diagram. That's the one that's interesting because it helps to show the scenarios. Use cases also sometimes can be used. Yeah, class diagrams rather more rare. So these types, yeah, are used. And let's continue with, yeah, this is another example where just I wanted to show you that we can use the key together with the diagram. That's a way to share with the team because if the team, some of the members are not familiar with the exact syntax or semantics, we can already show it in the key, which element means what, and then it's even faster that a person can get the understanding on this diagram. And some color coding, as you can see here, helps with this yellow filled system boundaries. So you immediately can see where the system ends, where its boundaries, and the use cases are in please, blue, purple, that we already see where is the use cases. I think we will move on right now. First of all, because of time concerns, but also because we don't really have all people able to do the task on Miro. But I can just share it with you, and you can try it out maybe yourself as a homework, and I can review it and offline after the workshop and leave the comments. So what I wanted to suggest to do here is to create a use case model for the airport check-in. So you can brainstorm and put down the use cases and actors that you may see there, and use one of the tools for diagramming, the Lucid chart. Here is the also cheat sheet for the syntax and semantics, and try to model it with this tool. You can add them, you can export there's a way to, let me just open it. It was already there, but okay. So some of the models. So you can export it as a PNG and add it to the Miro board, and I can review it, add the comments, and you can see the comments even afterwards. That would be absolutely okay from my side if you're interested to receive a feedback. So I created two sections for use cases actors. You can choose to fill in one of them, and you can add the diagram afterwards as well, because it also takes some time to get into that one. So yeah, so this is the link that has the template. Yeah, it's an example of the elements. So they are in this left panel. You can use all of them. Why the separate tool is because it's really tuned to creating the diagrams, and you see some of the things are quite nicely automated, like just arrows can be created faster, etc. So if it's okay for you, if you're ready to do that, I can review it if you add some elements here. Okay.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Let's go over some other diagrams and review also some of the essentials of requirements validation, negotiation, and prioritization. Some other diagrams that are serving the different purpose. Uml class diagrams show us the data perspective of the requirements, and it helps us to visualize which kind of classes exist in the system and their association between them. This is the modeling elements of class diagrams. So we have this as our main block. It's called class, where we use the name and some attributes below. We have different types of connection, also association between the classes, aggregation, composition, generalization, and it also has a way to show the number of instances that can participate in these connections. For instance, one person can have from 0 to many vehicles. So that's why we define the class person. We define the class vehicle with some information, name, birth date, and vehicle has vehicle ID, year of construction, etc. This is a very basic example. Generalization, aggregation, composition. Generalization, the idea is the same. That's the higher level, like vehicle, is generation of car and a truck. So if we say just in more generic, it's a vehicle. Aggregation and composition, it's all about there's a whole and a part. and the difference is that here it's more strict, that the parts cannot exist without the whole. Like it could be a car's engine and the car wheels, and then the car is they cannot, they can exist, but they will not function without the car, something like that. And here it can be separated. It can be for example, I'm thinking about a driver and the car, which the taxi service or something, some parts that would create the whole. Somehow all good examples are out of here. So it's let me think about example real quick. When we have certain system and several submodules can be functioning separately. Some two applications that are connected to each other, but for example don't, but can be called like a suite together, but they can work separately. This is an example of navigation system. Yeah, some more inputs, some more examples that classes can be route and road segment. Here it is, the example that a road segment can exist without a route, but the route includes certain road segments. So I hope it's a clear example. Let's move on. Uml activity diagram, as I mentioned, is helpful for visualizing certain steps, certain flows. These are the modeling elements on a high level. We will not go much deeper into it right now. Here is the visual depiction so that we can show the normal flow and the alternative flow. So our main success scenario, our alternative scenario would be possible to visualize with this diagram. And it's very helpful because it shows us the process, the flow much clearer. And we can see this by where the bifurcation happens, under which condition. It's more visible rather than putting it in the those use case tables, because it's in text, you need to read it, you need to be very, very focused. And here it's really like clear and one by one. Data flow diagram. Another type that I was also briefly mentioning, it shows the flow of the data, but it doesn't have a clear starting or ending point. It helps us just to see which kind of data is transmitted from which item to the other, and what are the interrelations between the different processes of the system and different external parties of the system. So you see here that there's calculate road process, and then there's traffic information server that passes the traffic information to the calculate route. Or another level of data flow diagram. So it can be described in a very high level where the system is just one element. And in this way, in this case, it will be called a context diagram, which we're also reviewing in the first workshop. That is helpful to show once again the system and its context and the relations of data between the system and its elements. As I mentioned, in data flows, we cannot see under which conditions or when does the process start or end. We can just see the overview, what are they and which data flows in which direction. Another modeling language that I'd like to mention, it's also widely used. It's Bpmn, business process modeling. notation, and it helps us with specifying the business processes and specifically. It has a very broad amount of elements that are possible to use, and it has its limitation. It cannot show the organizational structure, the functional breakdowns, or the data models. So it's really looking at the business processes. It has a wide, like broad variety of elements allowed that can be used. And why it is needed to have that many, it's because of the complexity of the business processes. So it's really to be able to describe very complex dependencies, connections, and etc. Some example, ordering and delivering pizza system, business process. So we have a pizza customer over here, and then the pizza vendor right here, and we see how flow of the user goes in the pool of the pizza customer, and we see which kind of processes and in which of the other sub levels of the pizza vendor happen, and what are the conditions, what are the messages flow, like what to visually depict the business process for certain tasks that a system should do, or just in general an organization wants to meet. This is all about diagramming. Do you maybe have any questions?
No, just too much information.
Yeah, I can understand. This is just to be clear. It's a bit of a overview. Diagramming would certainly need more time to cover. As you see, even like use case would be good just to focus on it and stuff. And that's why I suggest you to maybe try out this homework. You probably will have more questions or more things to review then additionally, because this is more of a broader overview of the methods of the diagrams that exist. And going into much detail, we will not be able to cover it right now. That's true. That will require more time. A couple of words about requirements, negotiation and validation, and we will wrap up this session. So there are a couple of principles of requirements validation. The main goal of validation is to make sure that our requirements are agreed. They are checked by the correct stakeholders from different views. We're sure they're correct. We need to understand that we need to separate the identification and correction of errors, in the sense that we don't try to fix everything as we go, but first we identify all errors, then we correct them. We may use modeling to also check the textual requirements and vice versa. And we should, of course, do the validation from time to time. We should repeat it. There are a number of techniques. The most widely used is commenting. So basically a review and then adding the comments. There are some other techniques, more structured, like inspections and walkthrough. This is very formalized process if it's need to make sure that it's absolutely correct and reviewed fully. So it's a bit more of a waterfall-like, more strict processes. And there are some techniques that we can read requirements from different perspectives, validate through prototypes, using the checklists. Then conflict management stages, conflict management needed for requirements when there are different views on the requirements from different stakeholders, and the person who works with them need to be able to process them and reach to the agreement ideally. And the stages that are present there is conflict identification, analysis, resolution, and documentation. There is there is different ways to come to the conflict resolution. And we should also understand what is the nature of the conflict. Is it a data conflict? Is it a structural conflict, conflict of interest, of value, or etc.? And there is a number of ways you can reach, ways you can check, ways you get to the agreement. Ideally, it's a consensus when everybody is agreeing to a certain approach, or you can go with less optimal ways, but sometimes also useful and needed. And the last part for today is prioritization. We need to prioritize the features sometimes, but person who works with requirements usually would do it together with the business stakeholders that are responsible for the scope. For instance, it can be also a product owner, for example, who's responsible for the backlog. We would use different prioritization criteria, select the stakeholders, artifacts, and prioritization techniques. There are several prioritization techniques, from the simple ones where we just rank the requirements from top to bottom, from the most important to the lowest, to some more categories like must-have categories like mandatory, optional, and nice to have, where we would provide these categories to several requirements and group them. And then there's even more complex ways of prioritization that's, of course, will take more time. It's Kana classification, where we would use these satisfiers, dissatisfiers, and delighters concept, and then see which ones we want to do first or in which percentage. And there's the more formalized processes to use some criteria of benefits, detriments, cost, risk calculated for every requirement, and have the ranking of more weighted criteria. Dear Julia, I thank you for participating in this workshop. I hope it was not too much of information. I hope you've learned something new for yourself, and I will be happy if you also do this homework. If you're interested to practice this, I will be happy to provide you feedback. Also, if you can just in few words share your feedback or impressions of the workshops, I will be happy to hear it.
Everything was great. It was all 3 times. So, and this one was really hard because of a lot of information, but in any case, I learned something new. For example, about user stories, use cases, as I don't use them in my project, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you for providing the feedback. Yes, the feedback received, probably it's too dense of a content for the 2 hours. But I hope that's like, an overview, a pointer to some further trainings, workshops, or your personal investigation. You can always access this Miro. I guess for some time it will be available, and you can also see the links, the references. And I hope you will get this issue fixed in Miro, and you can still browse through the things we were reviewing today.
Okay, I will try to recover access and to do this homework.
Yeah, okay, yes. Thank you so much. So I wish you to have a nice evening, and thank you for your active participation.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, bye.